A Russian armored team is sent to the front line. At the front, only 3 reconnaissance vehicles, 1 tank, and 2 infantry transport armored vehicles. The mission? To test enemy defenses. The Russian armored advance breaks through the front line, but only the APC makes it through. The tank does not share the same fate. As it advances, it triggers a landmine. The crew is forced to abandon the burning vehicle. Without clear information on what to do next, the armored transports begin a slow retreat. The formation collapses. Ukrainian artillery begins its attack, striking the APC, while the tank continues to burn. Part of the armored units following the reconnaissance vehicles tries to withdraw, but what they didn't know was that the terrain was filled with landmines. The mission ends in disaster. The reconnaissance group and its supporting armored vehicles are completely destroyed. And what comes next is even worse. An Azov unit, after receiving coordinates from reconnaissance drones, learns that a wave of Russian armored vehicles is advancing. Russian forces send 2 armored vehicles ahead to reconnoiter the area. They approach the zone while being constantly observed by the Ukrainian army. The order is given to begin the drone attack. The first strike hits, and shortly after comes the second, which sets one of the vehicles ablaze. One APC is neutralized, while the other advances and reaches the perimeter the Russians intended to capture. However, due to a failure in Russian intelligence, they were not informed that the field was filled with landmines. To assist in eliminating the armored units, a Ukrainian tank is deployed and joins the engagement alongside the drones. The tank lands a direct hit on a Russian APC. Once again, a failed Russian assault and a victory for Ukraine. In a new offensive, a Russian tank takes the lead of another armored wave. The first impact comes quickly, and the advance is halted. The armored vehicles are struck one by one. And amid the chaos, a retreat begins, only to encounter more mines along the way. Enemy forces appear disoriented and unable to define an immediate response. One APC makes a wide maneuver in an attempt to escape the danger zone, but it becomes just another failure for the Russians. The battlefield begins to resemble a graveyard of destroyed Russian armored vehicles, and none of the offensives succeed. The Russians capture no territory, while the Ukrainians hold their defensive lines and keep their morale high. A Ukrainian drone conducting perimeter surveillance reports to artillery that an extensive column of Russian vehicles is on the move. The drone operator quickly relays the coordinates with precision, and within seconds, artillery begins repeated firing. To increase engagement effectiveness, fragmentation shells are used. One of the tanks in the column is directly hit, demonstrating high efficiency against armored vehicles. The Ukrainian defensive line quickly requests support via radio. The Ukrainian commander then orders an infantry fighting vehicle, an American Bradley, to assist in the defense against the Russian column, together with infantry. The armored vehicle provides suppressive fire to support troop disembarkation. Everything is done quickly, because there is no time to lose. The Russians are already very close to the last defensive line. The Russians know they still need to cross a minefield, and for that, they use APCs to try to clear a path. But it's like finding a needle in a haystack. For the Russians, the attack does not end well, as the advance of the armored column is halted. A window of opportunity is spotted by the drone operator, who once again calls in artillery. The Bradley that brought the infantry continues supporting the battle. However, Russian forces fire an RPG that hits it. The armor proves effective, and it continues operating normally and advancing. The drone operator keeps observing the entire battle from the sky and informs the ground team that a new Russian column, taking advantage of the Ukrainians' focus, is attempting to advance along the right flank. A Russian soldier spots the drone and, attempting to neutralize it, fires multiple shots at it. On the ground and in the skies, with all information being relayed in real time, the Ukrainians realize that the Russian armored units are beginning a new strategy. The goal was to confuse the Ukrainian army, but what they didn't know was that no matter which direction they chose, they would be in a minefield. The tank leading the column advances but is neutralized, while another armored vehicle tries to move forward and is disabled. Amid minefields and chaos, Ukrainian artillery realizes the moment has come. Artillery begins consecutive barrages, determined to stop any attempt at enemy advance. Ukrainian drones are launched into the sky for reconnaissance and possible strikes. From above, it is observed that another wave of Russian armored vehicles is crossing Ukrainian fields, but they do not get far, as dozens of landmines had been placed in the area. Since the Russians are already close to the Ukrainian defensive line, they are within range for a ground assault. Ukrainian soldiers then use guided anti-tank missiles. A Russian armored transport vehicle is hit and disabled, creating a problem because it blocks the road that did not contain mines. An APC then has only one alternative, to deviate, but it hits a mine. Ukrainian artillery also launches an attack to contain the wave of armored vehicles. A rain of artillery munitions falls from the sky toward the Russian armored units, and chaos dominates the battlefield. Every attempt to advance becomes a problem for the Russians. Explosions are constant along that front line. Given the situation, part of the column decides to retreat. To try to force the attack again, in a disastrous measure, Russian armored units regroup and launch a new assault, this time across different terrain, and once again, the same scenario repeats. An armored transport vehicle triggers a landmine, while a tank is destroyed by another explosion. The Ukrainians realize that only a few armored vehicles remain, and if they are eliminated, the Russians will have no more offensive capability for that day, and troop morale will collapse. So the final Russian push must be contained. Drones are launched into the sky once again. Instead of retreating, an APC accelerates and relies on luck. But that day belonged to the Ukrainians. The vehicle enters a section of the field filled with landmines. The Russians, amid all the chaos, deploy their last armored reserves. Ukraine, however, has Leopard tanks on the front line, and the role of these Ukrainian armored units is to maintain relentless pressure on the Russians. Beyond the tanks stopping the Russian attack, what ultimately proves decisive in halting the advance are the minefields. With no hope and no effective forces left, the Russian offensive comes to an end. On another front line in the war in Ukraine, Russian armored units receive a new mission: to break through one side of the enemy's defenses. The operation begins with concentrated artillery strikes so the armored vehicles can advance. Part of the attacking force includes a tank, an MTLB carrying ammunition, and 2 armored troop transport vehicles. In addition to artillery, smoke screens are deployed so the progression can continue, reducing the visibility of Ukrainian artillery and drones. Even with the smoke, several drones remain in the area. On the ground, soldiers on the front line begin firing Javelin missiles. The armored units start taking hits and are neutralized. Besides the attacks on the ground, intense Ukrainian artillery fire begins, with fragmentation munitions used to increase the effectiveness of the counterattack. To completely neutralize the Russian assault, drones carrying explosive charges are also launched, and with precision, score direct hits on the armored vehicles. Afterward, only explosions can be seen across the battlefield, and another Russian offensive ends without any territorial gains. Like and subscribe to the channel, and watch now the video recommended especially for you.